Hey friends, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's one of the most powerful ways you can help the channel grow. Every like, comment, and share that you leave in the first few hours of a video tells YouTube that our stories are worth pushing to a bigger audience. With your support, I know we can get to 25,000 subscribers by Halloween. Remember, we never have ads in the middle of our stories. And don't forget, if you want to rep The Darkest Hour, visit thedarkesthourYT.com for exclusive merch you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for being part of this journey. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. There's something about a voice that slips in when it shouldn't, a whisper when no one's there, a sound that belongs to no living throat. We're used to noise from the world around us, traffic in the distance, the hum of a late-night TV, a house settling. But when those sounds arrange themselves in a way that allow us to hear something else, something aware and speaking, we realize the unknown is all around us. Tonight's stories bring us to that edge, voices caught in recordings, laughter that belongs to no one in the room, words spoken through walls of a place long abandoned. Different places, different moments, but always the same feeling that we're not speaking into silence, that something is listening back, reminding us that voices often have a way of outlasting the bodies that once carried them. So, let's get started, shall we? When I was in elementary school, I was the kind of kid who loved sleepovers, but never really fit into them. I'd pack way too much, my favorite blanket, my entire stash of nail polish, 3 different snacks just in case. I wanted to be prepared, but really, I just didn't want to be the one left out. That summer, Hannah, one of the popular girls in our grade, invited me over for her birthday sleepover. It felt like an honor, like I'd been pulled into some secret club. There were 4 of us, including Hannah, and we did the usual: popcorn, nail polish, too much soda. We played light as a feather, stiff as a board, until someone chickened out. And then we watched a PG-13 movie, pretending that it was scarier than it was, just so we could scream. By midnight, the living room was a mess of sleeping bags and junk food. Everyone was knocked out except me. I was drifting, that hazy stage between awake and dreaming, when I felt someone nudge my shoulder. I opened my eyes, and I saw a girl, a little girl, blonde hair sticking up like she just rolled out of bed, gray pajamas with a faded design. She looked younger than us, maybe 7 or 8. For a second, I thought that she must be Hannah's sister. I didn't know she had one, but she must. I was kind of annoyed that no one had mentioned her before, like, oh, by the way, there's this kid who's going to wake you up in the middle of the night. I whispered, "Are you Hannah's sister?" She didn't answer, she just looked at me. Her head was tilted, her eyes wide in that unblinking kid way. Then she asked in the softest voice, "Do you want to play hide and seek?" I really should have said no. It was 2 a.m. Everyone else was asleep, and I wasn't even fully awake myself. But I'd always been the kind of kid who said yes when I should have said no, and I felt bad. Maybe it would be fun. So I nodded. She smiled, just a little, like she was relieved, and then she tiptoed toward the hallway. I waited a few beats and then whispered my numbers into my blanket, counting up to 10. When I stood, the living room seemed darker and quieter. Even the TV screen had gone black, but I could have swore it was on. I padded into the hallway, my socks whispering against the wood floor. The air was cooler in there. It was a kind of chill that made me wish I'd brought my blanket along. I started with the obvious spots, behind the couch, under the dining room table, in the laundry room. No one was there. I was about to check the bathroom when I heard her voice. "Over here." It was sing-song, playful, like the way kids tease during games. I followed the sound, peering into the corners, tugging open closet doors. Nothing. "Over here." Closer this time. I spun, certain I'd catch her. But the hallway was empty. I kept going, whispering, "Where are you?" trying not to feel stupid. I could hear her clear as day, but she was never where the sound pointed. It was like she was always just out of reach or one step ahead. My searching must have gotten louder because one of the other girls stirred awake. Then Hannah sat up, hair sticking up like a crown, and she blinked at me. "What are you doing?" she mumbled. Embarrassed, I whispered back, "I'm playing hide and seek with your little sister." She frowned, and the other girl said, "Hannah doesn't have a little sister." That's when the other girl woke up and laughter started. They called me weird, asked if I was sleepwalking, teased me about dreaming with my eyes open. My face was burning. I laughed along like it was all a joke, but inside, I felt like I'd ruined everything. I was finally in their circle, and now I was the weirdo telling ghost stories at 3 a.m. I didn't bring it up again, not during breakfast and not on the ride home. I figured if I pretended it never happened, maybe they'd forget too. But a few days later, Hannah caught up with me after school. It was just the two of us walking, backpack swinging. The afternoon was too hot for words, and out of nowhere she said, "Hey, about the other night." My stomach dropped, and I braced for another round of teasing. Instead, she looked serious. I didn't want to say anything in front of them, but I've seen her too. I stared at her, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "The girl in gray pajamas," she went on. "She shows up sometimes, usually in the hallway. Sometimes she tries to talk to me. I just ignore her." She said it like she was confessing to something, like admitting it made it more real. I wanted to ask a million questions. What did she say? How long had she been there? Did she ever touch you? But Hannah just shook her head. "Don't tell the others. They won't want to come over if they know." We walked the rest of the way in silence. My skin buzzed like I'd swallowed electricity. That was over 15 years ago, and I still think about it all the time. I still see her in my head. The way that she smiled and bounced away. The way her voice was in the hallway, leading me deeper into the house, on a chase. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I found her. But really, I wonder if she's still in that house. I lost touch with Hannah years ago, but I've never lost interest with the ghost that lived with her. I used to work nights as a custodian at a hospital. I mainly liked it for the pay, which was good and steady. Plus, the halls were quieter after visiting hours, so that part was nice too. Most of the staff left by 9, so it was usually just me and a couple of nurses, also the security guard who was making his rounds. Hospitals at night are a little different. The hum of machines is louder when there's nothing to cover it. The floors feel longer, like they're stretching out ahead of you. I learned to keep a small radio in my pocket just for noise, though sometimes even the music made me uneasy, like I was interrupting a silence that belonged to someone else. One night I was finishing up on the 3rd floor, wiping down counters in one of the empty wings. The air felt cool, colder than usual. I figured the AC was working overtime, but the feeling carried a strange edge, like standing too close to the open door of a freezer. As I leaned over the sink, I felt it, the faintest breath against the back of my neck, enough to raise goosebumps. I turned quick, half expecting the security guard to be messing with me. But the hall was empty. Nothing but the echo of my shoes and that soft beep of a heart monitor down the corridor. I told myself that it was an air vent. It had to be, and I went back to work. But when I glanced up at the mirror above the sink, I saw something. Behind me in the reflection was the shape of a man. Not clear, just a tall, dark figure standing at the end of the hall, perfectly still. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. Turned back to the mirror. Nothing was there. Just the stretch of linoleum and my own pale face. After standing frozen for too long and listening, the building certainly felt heavier. Eventually, I finished my shift. I didn't tell the nurses or mention it to security. What was I supposed to say? I saw someone who wasn't there. I never saw the figure again, but I thought about it every time I passed that wing. How can you not? The breath, the reflection. It was almost too ordinary, like catching someone in the corner of your eye at the grocery store. Other than showing themselves, they really didn't do anything to try to scare me. So maybe ghosts aren't always here to frighten us. Maybe they just exist in things like reflections, drafts, or even silence, just waiting for someone to notice them. So this happened a while ago, and all I can say is that I'm just glad I had a witness with me. It wasn't just me, it was my cousin, and sometimes we'll still bring it up to each other, just to check that we remember it the same way. It was 2013 at a state park near where we grew up. We'd gone out there a lot as kids, mostly to fish or hang around the trails, but this time we were just hiking. It was summer, late afternoon, sun starting to drop low. We were maybe 2 miles in when we both heard a voice yelling for help. It was faint at first and carried on the wind, but it was loud enough that we both stopped in the middle of the trail. It sounded like a man. He was shouting the same thing over and over. "Help me, please." We thought someone had gotten hurt. The trail cuts close to a river, so maybe someone had fallen in. We shouted back as we walked, "Where are you?" But we didn't get an answer, just another round of, "Help me, please." We left the trail to follow the sound, and that's where things got kind of weird. The voice didn't stay in one place. It seemed to move. 1 second it was to the left, and then farther down, then behind us. My cousin said it was like it was leading us in circles. I tried to convince myself that it was just the way the sound bounced off the trees, but I've hiked there plenty of times, and sounds hadn't carried like that before. It felt closer than it should have been, like whoever was shouting was just beyond the next bend. But I couldn't help but notice that it sounded the same each time. It wasn't more urgent or less. At one point we came to the riverbank, and I swear the voice came from right across the water. It was shallow enough to cross if we wanted to, but something in my stomach knotted up. My cousin just shook his head and said, "Don't." He looked pale, like he was sick, and I guess I felt the same way. Like if we went after it, we would regret it. Call it trusting your gut, but we didn't go. We stood there, listening. The voice called again, the same way it had before. "It just sounds like a recording," my cousin said. I couldn't help but feel the same way, like it was mechanical, repetitive, identical. Then it shifted, sounded right behind us. We both turned around, expecting to see something, and there was nothing. That was enough for us. We backed off, found the trail again, and walked out faster than we should have with the sun dropping. By the time we got back to the parking lot, the woods were completely quiet. No birds or crickets, just that ringing silence that made me feel watched. The whole drive home, neither of us said much. It wasn't until later that night that we were back at his place, and he finally said, "I don't think that was a person." I agreed. I felt the same way. Even now, years later, I don't really like hiking that trail. And if I ever hear someone calling for help in the woods again, I'm not sure how far I'll follow it. And I kind of hate that. But we both agreed there was something really wrong with that whole situation. Not in the real life kind of way, but in a way that was like we weren't going to be able to understand it, and we were better off getting out of there. Last year I had to travel for work. Just a 2-day conference at a mid-sized hotel in a city that I'd never been to before. I didn't exactly look forward to these trips, just packing business clothes in one half of my suitcase and sweatpants in the other, but I was always excited for the free breakfast buffet. This hotel was old, not in a charming historic way, but in a slightly too dark, vaguely lingering smell way. The carpets were patterned to hide stains, and it was a kind of busy swirl that looked different depending on how tired your eyes were. My room was fine, bed, desk, TV mounted too high on the wall, but the bathroom immediately felt off. Stuffy, like the air had been sitting in there for way too long. Even with the fan on, it felt heavy, like it didn't want me in there. It was dark and dingy, sorta like the rest of the hotel, but worse. The first night while I was brushing my teeth, I realized it was darker in there than it should have been. The light above the mirror worked, but it cast shadows down instead of out. I stepped into the hall and flipped on the extra lamp near the closet, hoping it would brighten things up. When I turned back to the mirror, I was horrified. A lock of my hair, thick enough to see, was standing straight out, as though someone was holding it between their fingers. I don't scare easily, but it made my stomach jump, and my instinct took over. I whipped my head down to shake it free, only it didn't fall. There was resistance, a tug like something was still holding on. That was enough for me. I yanked my hair loose from this phantom. I grabbed my jacket and practically bolted downstairs. The hotel bar was nearly empty, and though my mouth tasted like toothpaste, I needed a drink. So I ordered that drink, trying to act casual, but I must have looked shaken because the bartender asked if everything was okay. I told him the truth, or part of it. I said that the bathroom, felt strange, like the air was bad in there. I joked about how maybe the hotel was haunted. He smirked and said, "You wouldn't be the first guest to say that." Well, that set me on edge, but he quickly waved it off. It's an old place, drafty. People love to scare themselves. It happens a lot. I've worked here 10 years and I've never seen anything. He said it with such confidence that I almost believed him. By the time I finished my drink, I'd convinced myself I'd overreacted. I thanked him and went back upstairs, told myself I just needed to sleep. For a while it worked. I fell asleep fast, the way you do after travel and one too many drinks. But then I woke up. It was exactly 3:30 a.m. The clock glowed red from the nightstand, the brightest thing in the room. At first, I didn't know why I was awake, but then I heard it. Banging. I shot upright with my heart pounding out of my chest. The sound was so loud and so sudden, I thought someone was trying to break into the room. My eyes went straight to the front door, but it was quiet there and untouched. The banging came again. It was from inside, the bathroom door. I can't describe how bad that felt. It wasn't the sound of a fan kicking on. It was fists, someone pounding on the other side of that closed door. My brain did that thing where it kept trying to explain it away. Maybe the neighbors, maybe something with the plumbing, but no. The sound was inside my room. I couldn't bring myself to open the door. I didn't even want to get close. I threw on my clothes, grabbed a bag, and left. Not the hotel, not yet. I had a job to do. I went down to the 24-hour gym, the only place with lights on and other people occasionally coming and going. I stood on a treadmill with my phone in my hand like I was ready to call someone, though I wouldn't have known what to say. I stayed there until I got my breakfast buffet. And then I went in, ate in silence, and forced myself back upstairs, only long enough to shower and change for my work event. I looked like a zombie in the mirror, hair still damp, eyes rimmed red. I avoided that bathroom as much as I could, brushing my teeth in the corner like a kid afraid of the dark. That night after the conference wrapped up, I didn't go back. I found a chain hotel near the airport, the kind with bland lighting, rooms that smelled faintly like cleaning. It felt soulless in a way that was comforting. I haven't really thought much about that trip since, except for when people ask me if I've ever had a ghost experience, kind of like this forum. I don't know what I believe, but I do know this. I'll never forget the feel of my own hair being held by something that wasn't there, or the sound of fists pounding on the bathroom door that no one was behind. In 2004, my friends and I spent our nights driving nowhere in particular, because there wasn't anything else to do. No streaming, no group chats to scroll through, just the car and someone's shitty CD burning. You learned a lot about people on those drives. Who talked too much, too loud, who fell asleep with their mouth open, who tried to flirt and failed spectacularly. It was a good place to be a spectator. That summer, I think I was 19, working at the bait shop until midnight, then joining the same crowd for these aimless loops around town. Like it was movie stylish, but really we were just a bunch of kids trying not to be home. On a humid Tuesday, the usual four of us piled into Jake's dad's minivan. It was me, Jake, his younger sister Mia, and Derek, who smelled permanently of cheap cologne and regret. Jake was driving because that's what Jake did. His dad worked nights and never noticed the dents in the bumper. We left the highway for a stretch of country road that ran beside an old marsh. It was the place that had one streetlight every half a mile and a radio that turned to static the closer you got to the bridge. We liked it for the quiet. The way your voice sounded smaller there, like you could disappear into the air and not be missed. It was late. The air tasted like salt and cut grass, the thing that you smell right before a storm. Mid-conversation about a girl nobody wanted to chase, the radio fuzzed and the CD skipped. On impulse, Jake turned the stereo off. The silence that followed felt strange, like a held breath. And then we heard a whisper, close to the back seat. So faint, I thought it was the hiss of the AC at first. "Mia?" it said. We all froze because the sound had this wrong shape. It wasn't a voice in the car from one of us. It was thin, almost like someone had cupped their hand around the speaker of the night and blown gently through it. Mia's hair lifted the way it does when someone runs a hand through it, though the window was closed and the air was still. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked. His voice had that high edge people get when they're trying to joke but are actually holding fear. Mia said nothing. Derek laughed. Too loud. A filler laugh meant to move the moment forward. "Probably frogs," he said. That's what we always said when something small freaked us out. Call it nature. Call it something explainable. The road had frogs here, sure. But the whisper had been a syllable, a name, not a croak. We tested it because that's how dumb, brave people behave at 19. We all called out different names, half joke, half dare. The air stayed the same. Then Mia, trying to be silly, said, "Well, what?" Silence. And then again, softer, but closer. It was leaning into the vinyl seat beside us. "Don't stop. Not here." Jake muttered that it was the wind, that somebody else must have been doing it. Who was messing with him, he demanded. But he floored the accelerator, like he would prove that he wasn't scared. The van bumped over a pothole. A truck's headlights sliced past, washing the marsh in a white glare. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. We laughed a little too loud and called it a midnight prank. Except we hadn't played a prank. None of us could explain what happened, but it happened. Seemingly unaffected, Jake continued speeding down the marsh road. He was telling some story about a high school teacher that he'd embarrassed. He was trying to remember some sort of punchline when the sound came, a soft, panicked whisper. "Brake, brake now." It was that same voice. Came from the back seat like someone leaning forward and firming their palms on the jump seat. Jake's fingers tightened on the wheel and he slammed on the brakes. The van screeched, tires whining, and we all hurled forward in the seatbelts. A second later, a deer exploded out of the ditch, crossing the road where we would have been had we not braked moments before. Its hooves kicked the bumper as it passed, a gasp of wood and fur, and a smell that smelled like something breaking. We would have hit it if Jake hadn't braked. We would have gone off into the shallow marsh where the ditches are deep, deeper than they look, and the water takes time to give you back. The deer's eyes caught the moon, and for half a breath, the world held that bright, awful look of something you almost killed by accident. Mia hadn't been wearing her seatbelt, so I think it literally saved her life. I don't know if this can be considered paranormal, but truly, we've never known what else to call it. We all feel like we heard a ghost voice. We just don't know who it belonged to. Our guess is somebody who's died along that road, maybe. It's not exactly free of accidents, but we'll never really know. In 2007, our district closed down the middle school and built a shiny new one across town. The old building sat behind a chain-link fence, brick walls deteriorating, windows black with dust. Its gym doors were chained shut, probably like a warning. Most people forgot about it, but if you were 16, restless, and allergic to Friday night silence, it was less an eyesore and more an invitation. We didn't call it haunted out loud, but that's the word that was heavy on our minds. There were 4 of us who went, my best friend Alex, his cousin Jesse, and our friend Felicity, and me. I was the quiet one, the one who noticed too much, laughed too late, and went along anyway. We met at the Sonic, fries, cherry limeades, pretending that this was just another night, and it really should have been. It wasn't official until Jesse leaned on the hood of Alex's car and said, "We should check out the school." Nobody said no, and that's how you get trapped. Peer pressure disguised as a shrug. The fence wasn't hard to get through. The side door by the cafeteria was already cracked open, glass missing at the corners. Inside, the air was thick with mold and chalk dust. Every step echoed too sharp and too long. I kind of felt like our nerves were leaking out. The halls looked like time had gone sour for sure. Lockers, paint was stripping, and the murals from the 90s. Rainbows, kids holding hands, slogans about kindness. They were warped under our flashlights into something uncanny. It was perfectly creepy. Felicity walked ahead, beam darting, her free hand clenching into a fist. All likely feeling the same nervousness, we agreed. Stick together. No splitting up. But Jesse kept calling out, joking, his voice bouncing. Bet this is where the teachers sacrifice the kids, he muttered. His own laugh echoed really loud. And then we heard something that wasn't us or the pipes. It was a sound threading the air, humming, thin, tuneless almost, steady like a child passing the time. We didn't move, and Jesse said, "It's the pipes," his voice cracking though. We all knew pipes don't hum lullabies. Instead of running though, the sound pulled us forward. My sneakers, everyone squeaking on the tile. We passed the science wing, glass tanks filmed over with green haze. Empty, but eerily left in place. The humming led us to the gym doors, big double doors chained together. Rust was bleeding from the handles, but through the gap came the voice. It was a bit higher now. Clearly a girl humming, younger than any of us. No one was laughing or making much of a noise at all. Felicity whispered, "Don't open it." Her voice was trembling. I thought that it might break. Nobody put up a fight. We decided, let's not open it. Despite the unease, we stood there longer than I thought we would have. The humming, it felt aware, like they knew we were there. And then suddenly it stopped. I think the silence was worse. It was that expectant, thick silence. My breath was raspy in my ears. Jesse cursed and spun, swearing someone brushed his arm. His flashlight cut across the hall and there was nothing. But that broke us. We ran, clumsy, shoving, tripping over each other. My knee tore open on the tile when I fell. We didn't stop until the humid night air hit us. Then came some sort of laughter. It was loud and brittle. It didn't come from us. We didn't stop talking about it. Later that night, Alex said he thought he remembered his aunt saying that a girl had drowned in the gym pool back in the 80s, before they filled it in. We never did confirm if any of that was true, but none of us ever went back either. Eventually, they bulldozed the entire thing, and it was just an empty lot. Still, over the years, I've considered going back to that empty lot or whatever it might be now, and just listening. Seeing if I can hear that humming. Part of me wants to know if I could experience something so unexplainable twice. And yet I've never been able to bring myself to do it. Back in 2016, a friend and I took a road trip from Colorado to Texas. We were broke college kids, and the plan was mostly gas station snacks, cheap motels, and seeing how far we could get before class started again. I don't remember half the tourist stops that we made, but I remember the hotel. We'd driven all day, and by the time we rolled into some small town just past midnight, we were so fried that anything with a bed sounded good. The only place with a vacancy was one of those 2-story motels where every door opened straight into the parking lot. There was that neon sign buzzing, a soda machine half lit, that kind of place. $45 a night, we didn't care. The room was a motel, but at least there were 2 queen beds. There was a dresser, a TV bolted down, and a lamp that leaned slightly to the left. It smelled like bleach and old carpet, but that just told me at least they washed the place. We tossed our bags down, cranked the AC, and collapsed. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up because I thought my friend had said something to me. It was just like a whisper, right between our beds, but I heard it so clear, close enough that I could have sworn that she was leaning over. I didn't catch the words, just the rhythm of her voice. I mumbled something back, probably, "What?" and rolled over. That's when I realized my friend was asleep, breathing slow, turned away from me. I told myself I was definitely dreaming and tried to go back to sleep. But a few minutes later, it happened again. A voice, right in between us. "Do you hear me?" I sat up this time. The space between the beds was empty. I tried to rationalize. The TV, pipes, neighbors. Except the TV was off. The AC was humming. The rooms on both sides, I think they were empty. Ours was the only car on that side of the lot. I didn't say anything, I just laid there. My eyes were open and I was waiting for it again. And sure enough, maybe 5 minutes later, a voice whispered, "Wake up." I thought about shaking my friend, but the fear of sounding crazy kept me where I was. I lay still until I finally drifted off out of sheer exhaustion. The next morning, over a free continental breakfast, waffles and watery orange juice, my friend looked at me. "Hey, did you try to talk to me last night?" I nearly dropped my plate. I asked what she meant. She said she woke up twice to a whisper between the beds. First, it sounded like me asking if she was awake. Later, it said their name. They were so sure that it was me until they rolled over and saw that I was out cold. She said when she tried to go back to sleep, she could have sworn she felt me tap her on the shoulder. She turned around again, and I was out cold. She said it was sometime before 3 a.m., so before my experience. We didn't stay a second night. We packed up before checkout and we drove until we found a bigger town with a chain hotel. I stayed in plenty of cheap motels since, and nothing like that's ever happened again. But I can't not think about it whenever I pass those run-down roadside places with a neon sign buzzing. I just have that little insider knowledge that somewhere out there, there's a room where voices wait until you're too tired to question what you're hearing. And surely, it's not the only motel either. If you were born after 2000, cassette recorders existed. They ate batteries, hissed, and made everything sound like it lived behind glass. That matters because hearing something on tape has a texture to it. It feels recorded into time, like a fossil of sound. It was one of those useless summer nights. My cousin Mark's place always smelled like incense and whatever he'd been frying earlier. The living room had a thrift store couch, a lamp with a crooked shade, and a bookshelf for things that nobody wanted to throw away. 7 of us were there. Me, Mark, Jen, and her vintage band tees I always wanted to steal, and 2 biker shop dudes and their girlfriends. They always seemed to find their way there when we were offering pizza. We found this recorder in the closet. Plastic, faux walnut veneer, a little red recording button that glowed when you pushed it. Nobody knew whose it was, and someone said, "Let's record a seance." Half derisive, half hungry for something different. We put the recorder on the coffee table and set it to record. We lit a single candle because rituals took part when there was wax and smoke, right? We pretty much did anything we'd seen. Circle, holding hands, even when it felt funny, and we asked simple questions into the room. Is there anyone here with us? If you are, what's your name? The first time the candle flickered and went out, there was this soft, ordinary puff that made Jen squeal, and 2 people laughed nervously. Nobody heard a voice. Nobody heard footsteps or whispers. The power of the moment was mostly the silence that followed. Someone joked to break the tension, and then we let it die down. But I stayed. There was a smaller group after some left because it was late and they had to work. Nobody pressured anyone. When people got creeped out, they left. But Mark and I and Jen were stubborn. After a while, the mood turned more curious than scared. We drank less and listened to the little clicks on the recorder. At 3 a.m, with the candle melted low, we stopped the experiment because it felt like pushing our luck. We left the recorder sitting on the coffee table with the tape inside. People went to the couch, some to sleep, some to stare at their phones. Around 4, when the kitchen was cooler and the loud ones were gone, Mark propped himself up and said, "Play it back." Sounded like a waste of time at first, but the room did have that hush where anything could be treated as important. We'd stayed awake too long. The tape started with our laughter and the clumsy questions that we'd asked. Then, under the hiss, there's a voice. Not one of ours. It was thin and near, as if someone had put their mouth to the little speaker to speak inside your skull. "Hello," it said. We paused it and rewound and played it again because that's what you do, especially when the sound on the tape should be explainable. The voice answered some of the questions that we had asked earlier. Not everything. It picked and chose. When we'd asked for a name, it offered one, small, ordinary, like the kind a neighbor might have. Tim. When we asked, "Are you dead?" the voice answered simply, "Yes." The voice's replies, they followed our questions exactly. We hadn't heard any of it live, but they were clearly there. The room had been quiet except for that one candle puff. The recorder had captured something that none of us had perceived in the moment. We tried to paper over it. Maybe someone had taped over the cassette earlier with something we didn't know. Maybe the recorder had picked up a stray radio signal. We took the recorder into the kitchen and played the tape through a different speaker. Same voice. We played it on a phone with an adapter. Same voice. Like I said, the voice didn't answer everything. It refused some questions, offered small domestic details for others that made us look at each other because they were too particular. Mark's socks in a shoebox, a dog that used to bark at the gate. Maybe the most interesting part was the instruction that came before the candle went out. After an exchange of those half questions, a patient, flat voice said, "Stop now." Then, faint but unmistakable on the microphone, there was the sound of a candle exhale. The same soft, final breath that the candle had made hours earlier in the room. We had heard nothing live. The candle had gone out during the seance, we'd all heard that, but we had not heard a voice saying, "Stop now." The tape had both the voice and the candle's little pop. Jen's face went colorless. She was the one who'd found the recorder. She was also the one who, without much drama, said, "Burn it." She wasn't so much asking as she was demanding it. Nobody argued. Out of respect for the story as a whole, I'll tell it from my dad's perspective as he told it to me. This is him responding to me when I asked if he believes in ghosts. So, pardon the French. Here we go. I got your mom knocked up immediately after getting out of prison. And shit, don't get me wrong. I was excited to be a dad, but in order to provide for my new family, I had to get a job fast. Do you remember your Uncle Howie? No, you were about 3 or 4 when he died. Well, I think you're old enough to know the truth. Howie wasn't your real uncle. I met him in prison. He'd already served 15 to 16 years for murdering his drug dealer in the 70s after his weed got laced with acid. It was easy to do back in the day. Mix that with soaking the joint paper in LSD, he went bonkers. He says it was self-defense, but I say he's a fucking liar. Prison was good for him, though, because when I met him, he was completely sober-bober. I was serving a way shorter sentence for that armed robbery thing, but Howie got released 2 years before I did. But during those 2 years, we were still in contact, you know? He says he's got a job lined up for me when I get out, so boom, right when I'm released, I call him asking about it. He tells me, yeah, I'm lead on the grounds team at Golden Hills. I'm thinking, Golden Hills? Isn't that the cemetery? He tells me no, it's a graveyard, not affiliated with the church. Fuck it, cool. That night I pulled my loud-ass chopper out of Grandma's storage shed. After some oil and gas, it revved up and I was able to show up to work the next day. The shit Howie had us doing was like mowing lawns, clipping the hedges, picking up the garbage, and it wasn't a bad gig. I was there for over a year before going to work at the plant. Well, this happened a few months after working there. It was just me, Howie, and some dude named Taylor. That doesn't really matter. He was doing his own thing. Howie was freaking out because of an upcoming funeral that was going to be held the next morning. It's a full day's work with 6 guys all pulling their weight. With only 3 of us that day, we were all assigned our own set of things we needed to have ready that day with no assistance from each other. The other 3 guys on the team were all driving together that day, and the car got a flat or something. Doesn't matter. We all knew it was going to be a day any way that you cut it. So, both of them have left at this point. Howie's going to get flowers and decorations, and Taylor's sent to Home Depot to get a tarp and a canopy and a drill. I stay behind to get the plot dug deep enough to have the coffin tossed in it. We have a big excavator that we use to move around all the dirt for this kind of job, but that day, it shit out when I tried to start it up. I ended up calling the flower shop from the phone inside. I tell the lady working there to have Howie call me when he gets there. Phone rings 5 minutes later and I tell him what happened to the excavator, and then I ask what we're supposed to do in this situation, and he tells me to grab a shovel. I'm sure you've dug up some holes when you were little. The novelty of it seems like fun, but the fun quickly goes away when your back and your shoulders start to ache. The plot that I was digging was going to be somewhere near 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. No, not 6 feet. Apparently they only did that to stop grave robbers. I got the job done in a few hours. I don't think it was even noon yet. So I'm on my hands and knees down there with measuring tape, and I hear someone say from behind me, "Is this one for you?" Now at the time, I was fresh out and I still had that PTSD brain, so I stand up and turn around thinking this guy's threatening me. But his voice didn't match what I was looking at, because he had a deep voice, So when I saw a little boy in a tiny little blue 3-piece suit standing outside the grave looking down at me, I didn't believe it was him. But there was nobody else around, and this kid was 5 or 6, practically a toddler. I go, "What?" And he says again, in the same ridiculously low voice, pointing down to the grave, "Is this one for you?" I said, "What the fuck are you talking about, kid? Where's your parents?" He points in a direction and says, "They're over there." I couldn't see anyone else in the graveyard but me and this kid, and the way he was talking was weirding me out, so I told him to scram. I was working, trying to get my job done. The kid runs past me. When I turned around to see which way he went, I was met face to face with a growling, snarling, hungry coyote. One of its eyes was missing. Its mouth was foaming, like it had rabies or something. The only thing I had for protection was the tape measurer. It got real close to the edge and began smelling the air with big sniffs. I was sure it was going to jump in there with me, attack. But it circled around the grave twice, and then just went on its way through the bushes, 20 yards from the grave plot. I climbed out of the grave and couldn't find that kid or his parents in the graveyard. I'm no bitch, but that scared the shit out of me. The combination of it all. I don't know where any of them came from or where they'd left to. I know the coyote left through the bushes, but there's a chain link fence right on the other side. I don't think it would have been able to clear it. But by how it went into the bushes, it was like he went right through the metal. A few minutes later, the guys got back. I was already done with my end of the job that day, so with them there to lock up, I didn't waste any more time being there. I got on my chopper and woke the dead with my exit. Weeks later, maybe months, I'm mowing the plots, there's one grave that I have to do by hand because of the way that the tombstone's built. The bottom part stretched out into the little sandbox. It's a child's grave that I'd never paid attention to until that day I happened to be cleaning the walkway with a weed whacker, and I got a ton of grass all over the sandbox in the front of the tombstone. So I get down to clean it all up. But when I'm wiping off the picture that's on this tombstone, guess who I see? That little kid in the blue suit. He was wearing the same suit in the picture. Name was Timothy something. 1964 to 1970. Creepiest full circle thing I ever put together. Nothing like that ever happened again working there, but once is enough. Taylor had a few stories about ghosts chasing him around the grounds, but how he stayed tight-lipped. If anything ever did happen like that to him, he didn't say. But yeah, that was it. This was Thanksgiving 2011. My aunt hosted, same as every year. The house was crowded, cousins in the living room, football on the TV, kids running through the hallway. Dinner was late, as usual. The dining room table was too small for everyone, so half of us sat in the kitchen. I ended up at the counter with my mom and my cousin Olivia and my grandfather. The noise carried between rooms, dishes clattering, people shouting over each other, but I heard a different voice. It came from just above my left shoulder, level with my ear. A woman's voice, clear but quiet, saying my name, just once. Though the voice wasn't entirely familiar, I just turned around to see who wanted me, and there was no one there. The space behind me was empty, except for the pantry door. I thought maybe that I'd misheard, except Olivia looked at me at the same time, and she asked, "Did someone just call your name?" Her face was flat. She wasn't joking. My mom asked what we were talking about. I told her. Olivia confirmed that she'd heard it too. My grandfather said nothing. He just stared down at his plate. Dinner moved on. People talked, laughed, passed plates. The moment stayed quiet between us. Later, when the kids went outside, I asked Olivia again. She repeated what she heard. A woman's voice close by saying my name. She said it was clear, like someone was leaning in. My grandfather spoke up. He said, "That's how your grandmother sounded when she wanted you to listen." He didn't smile when he said it. He didn't even look at me. She'd been dead for 6 years, and that was the end of it. The conversation shifted. The noise of the house swallowed everything again. Later, I was talking to my grandfather. I knew that the reason he couldn't look at me was just because he was sad. But I thought it was kind of wonderful. So I told him, "If that was Grandma, I think that's really nice." He finally smiled. He said that he knew it was, that he'd heard her before, and he hoped I'd hear her again. I did too, but I haven't heard her since. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough for those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members, Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, COLTDADDY Eagle, MALLORY Dominguez, KARI WATKINS, PILAR GUILLOT, TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, RIPLEY, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Landshark, Danielle Hecht, Mama P, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Geos, Marvin Allen, Forgotten Ruins TV, Raven Wolf, Carlos, Stacia Gillette, Nate Black, Jill Harper, Kathy Balkenbush, Cosmic Chick, Sierra Guerrero, Deanna Kuzma, Nathan Bremer, Demian Forrester. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons: Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamra K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., Bobo Jenkins, Rachel S., and Linda W. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon or becoming a channel member. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour, YT. Stay spooky.